Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. Today I wanted to talk about an interesting aspect of Islam and God in general that we Muslims had an idea of when we approached Islam and the way we revered Islam. According to Muhammad, being the final prophet, he is bringing this religion that is the final, perfect, and a very well thought out, basically, religion, the perfected religion. So when we see how Muslims approach Islam and how scholars and a lot of like the zealots and supporters of Islam, how they describe Islam as being very perfect. They seek so much spirituality in every single aspect of it, right? Like the letters, number of letters, the way things are arranged, the numerology of it, the specific sounds of letters and how they hold power. So they all really distilled this meaning and spirituality from very specific things about the way the religion has been put together. The words, the way the surahs are arranged, every single aspect. So you would understand that Islam, the way religion was, it was a very, curated, like very well thought out, picked hand by hand, piece by piece. God picked the Muhammad's lineage very carefully. The Quraysh were very, pinpoint. Like nothing was a coincidence, right? Everything had a purpose and everything was so specifically handpicked. So when I reveal to you all this information that I'm going to reveal to you, a different perspective of looking at Islam, you will be surprised to say that, well, hang on, aren't we talking about the perfected method of religion here, where God, or basically Muhammad's, idea of Allah, has really created this perfect idea of religion? And among the five pillars, like a very like crucial piece of Islam is the Hajj. As many of you know now, that Hajj is actually pre, Islam. For some of you that may not know, let me explain. Hajj, the whole corner, one of the rukn, or like the five pillars, like holding up Islam basically, is Hajj. So you are assuming that Allah really, handpicked these rituals and this way of method of worship specifically for the rest of the world, for all eternity, for all time. And we find out, the first aspect that the Hajj is actually pre-Arab, right? It's like, sorry, pre-Islam. It's in the pagan Arabs used to perform that. And a lot of you might come with the same idea and logic. Well, it is, the religions did send a lot of previous books. So, of course, there must be some idea of these religions already practiced in the world. But when you come and look at it, you see there's no absolute trace of the idea of Hajj in any previous books, that Islam or Muhammad is claiming like credibility or legitimacy from, which is he claims Abraham and he's trying to claim Jesus and everybody, he claims that he's from there, that line of thinking and that line of religion, but you end up seeing that there's absolutely no mention or no trace of Hajj. God has been sitting on this plan of Hajj for a long time, apparently, the perfect religion, and he always wanted that practice, but there was really never ever a mention of it for generations, for all these people who've been worshiping the same apparently God, had never ever wanted Hajj. So that's, kind of an interesting question mark. Like there's no mention of Kaaba, no incidents of Hajj. But the people who do have that pagan, Hajj is actually these pre-Muslims, like the Arabs, which we had at that time. They somehow had figured out this magical practice that was a pillar of Islam. They had figured it out, the Hajj. So you might be like, well, maybe it was something and it was like reformed. So let's go into this detail. No, Hajj is actually the same exact practice as the pagans, the idol worshippers, the kuffar, the mushrikun, this horrible people that, had no clue about and would reject Islam. They had actually nailed down the Hajj perfectly. This Islamic Hajj that we are still practicing, they had figured it out and they had nailed it down, practice by practice. So the circumambulating the tawaf, pagan. The ihram, pagan. The standing of at, when you're entering and there's like that. Coming at Arafat and Wuquf, pagan, right? They had figured out, these Jahil Arabs had figured this out. Animal sacrifice. Oh my God, the goat, sacrificing some animal for God. Again, pagan. The mushrikun had it down. The extreme reverence for the black stone. You guessed it, pagan. The throwing of stones, the rujum of throwing of stones. Again, pagan. We have a new story that we're throwing it at the shaitan. They used to throw it at the same evil entities, pagan. And you might wonder that, the timing won't be different. No, the same month, Dhul Hijjah, which was considered sacred, pagan. Now let's take this step, let's take it up more. Let's take it up a notch. All the sacred months that were in the pagan, the mushrikun, the kuffar, the Quraysh, all these people who've been practicing for, years, centuries in their Arab center, and you're saying that God had created these divine timings. These are specifically, Allah, the creator of the cosmos, has figured out this lunar cycle and created these very specific sacred months that we still practice in Islam today, Muslims. So of course he put a lot of thought into it, and he told it only to Muhammad because we needed to know that. We needed to know exactly which timings those were. These are sacred times and months. Again, the same point that the previous religions, the previous Jews and Christians had no similar lunar calendar. We do not have the same similar months of sacred. But who has them? Who has figured them out? The pagans. The Arab pagans, the idol worshippers, the Jahils had figured out the sacred months, the sacred times. So, question yourself, is this coincidence? Is this really the perfect religion? Allah wanted you to figure out the same exact months, but it's all pagan Arab. It's literally paganism that has just come into Islam, this perfect religion. Let's go in more. Let's examine further. So we have the months, the sacred months, Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram and Rajab. The same exact months, the Jahils have figured out without much intervention, without, any messenger, without any need from Allah, basically. They figured it out. They had it nailed down. But who hadn't figured out? These centuries of, Christians and Jews, who've been worshiping Allah and God and the same God, but they never had a whisper of this. So why did we really need all this pagan ideas to be figured out by the Arabs, by the Jahil? But, suddenly now Muhammad is claiming that we all have to follow the same exact method because we will be lost. But these Jahils, had it nailed down. They had it figured out before Muhammad, without ever needing Muhammad. They knew all the same exact practices. When we look at why they had, the pagans had the sacred months, basically to prevent fighting, to fast, to worship, and to carry on trade. These were the reasons. It's, to the keen and eye who can take things, who can actually approach with an open mind and open heart, the same things Muslims accuse other non-Muslims. But if you were to approach with an open mind and open heart, you would see that Hajj and Kaaba is really stone worship, Kaaba worshipping. Is it essentially that the same thing? You've really replaced this whole idol, smaller idol with a bigger box, with a bigger cube. And the same reverence, the same stone kissing, same bowing to. I mean, no, it's actually an abstract idea of an abstract God, but that's his. So that's the exact thing that they, all the other idol worshippers say. It's not really the idol, it's the abstract idea of God. Where's your superiority coming from? The whole pagan practice, act by act, copied, literally absorbed, from paganism into this idea, what Muhammad likes to call Islam. Literally, just same exact thing. Yet he continues to convince everyone about how original, authentic, and, handpicked all of this Islam is. The sacrifices they used to make in the name of their God, their idol. And now we have, for Allah, the new God, the new idol, really. This is what it is. The new idol God that is supposedly abstract. We are taking some from the Jews and Christian, and we remixed it with all this paganism. That's what it was. right? Allah, the bigger idol. Allahu Akbar, Allahu, the bigger idol. That's all that is. Some other worrying practices, that were effectively absorbed into Islam from paganism, the way to pray. Oh, that because the Quran had conveniently forgot to actually specify these things because these things were already there. They already knew. The pagans already knew everything. That's why there's no mention of it. The whole idea that we have, what else, because we are not pagans, we needed the whole culture, and that's why we have all this hadith and sunnah. How to pray, they already knew that. They already practiced that pre-Quran, pre-Islam, pre-Muhammad. Sujood, pagan. Another practice, the running between Safa and Marwa. Well, that surely has like a whole story to it. It's like, Hajj running between the thing because of her son, but again, it is pagan. They used to do the same exact thing. Yes, the story was changed. It was for different idol worships that they were called. They ran between the hills in honor of Isaf and Naila, fertility gods. Pagan. All of it, explicitly preserved. I would say that Islam has beautifully retained paganism. If they're like, oh, it's intact, it's intact paganism. That's what it is. And, this is a good hedgeway to point in, because now how today's Muslim scholars or any, scholars have such a inherent disregard, what's the word? Disdain for taqleed, right? Taqleed, imitation. Oh my God. It's like they could have a whole school or a whole thing explaining taqleed and why it's so bad. But then you come here and you're like, well, hold on. Everything about Islam is paganism. The whole thing is taqleed of the Arabs that were already there. What do you have to say about that, right? The Jahils had figured it out already, apparently. They didn't need all of this. They knew how to pray. They knew how to do Hajj. They knew how to fast. They knew how to sacrifice in the name of their gods. All of that existed verbatim into Islam, absorbed effectively, retained intact. So that's what is intact in Islam, apart from this whole idea of God sending out the word of God and that has remained intact. No, paganism has actually come into what we have packaged neatly as by Muhammad as Islam. And the favorite idea is that even if you don't have the intention to perform like Christmas or, pray to, if you're like bowing in Christian Jesus or in a mandir or in a guru, like the Gurdwara, and you're performing that, even if the act, if you just imitate but you're not actually praying to them, is equivalent, that's what the Muslim scholars tell you. So here we have all these Jahils who have done all these things. They figured out the Quraysh, that Muslims like to call the Quraysh Jahils. Muhammad used to call them that. They had basically figured out the whole of Islam and how to practice it. Are they going to Jannah? Because even though their intention was some other god, but they had practiced it literally the same exact thing. So where's your hate for or disdain for taqleed here? Now let's take it a step further. Muhammad, with his direct communication to this almighty, all-creating God that knew everything, still chose to retain paganism, ihram, they didn't say like, hey, we can't imitate the Quraysh. Oh my God, that's so beneath us. We need to come up with something better. None of that arguments. They're absolutely fine taking, exactly what the Quraysh did. And now, what do we have? We have the same exact mentality. We're taking literally everything from paganism. How to wear the clothes, what to eat, dates. Oh my God, paganism. Breaking your fast with date and water, paganism. What to wear, the abaya, the hijab, paganism. The beard, the dress, 7th century paganism, culture. This is literally word for word and from there. And here these people are thinking that, they're practicing some sterile, original, pure, perfection Islam God religion. Completely ignoring the whole lot. Like, you really have to detach. You have to be super into the faith of believing that you're like, hey, no, that's actually what God wanted, for all eternal, all the time, to practice these pagan ideas. The Hajj, night vigils, the highest level of like one of the further than, the mandatory worships. You guessed it. Paganism. Pagans used to do it. sit in the night under the moonlight chanting, night vigils, praying to their God. So I wanted to make this video as an eye-opening, situation to open your heart and open your mind and come with that aspect, which is very easy for people to say, for Muslims to say to others, but they have a hard time practicing it themselves. They cannot come with an open mind and open heart and see, can you call out all the pagan ideas in Islam? I would actually invite you to write further comments in the, beneath this video and tell me what other pagans ideas have you searched, have you researched and found out? Literally all of this is out in, out in the open. It's all research, all documented. But it's very hard to come with this with an open mind and see that, yes, Islam is literally Muhammad's pagan religion packaged neatly and, effectively absorbed everything and packaged as Muhammad. And he tries to take credibility, put all this credibility from other religions. If you're interested in examining further about your deep-rooted ideas, if you were a Muslim, I highly recommend checking out my program and seeing clear examples and details of what ideas come up when you are actually examining your beliefs and your ideas. Where are you still holding on to paganism that you probably don't even realize? Pagan ideas that have deeply formed generations of us. With that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.